I am so thrilled to be here, particularly a huge shout out to my Ogilvy colleagues, a few of our 25,000 around the world who work actually trying to improve everything from quality of life, education, health, much as so many of you do here. I am so thrilled to get out of Washington, D.C., where I live. I mean, I can't begin to tell you. It's, you know, you go out to lunch, you go out to dinner, everybody's on DEFCON 1 all the time. So I came up here and I thought, oh, God, a world of immersion, a world of VR. I'll get out of that cesspool down there. And so I go to the marketplace here, and I highly recommend it if you haven't been to the marketplace to see it. You've been, right? Pretty cool, right? So I got to tell you, though, I didn't find a relief. I went into the marketplace, and I see that Cognito is there, and you can practice talking with virtual humans to learn to navigate conversations in real life. Something in DC that's totally extinct. We need Cognito in DC. And then I see that there's one called Black Friday, and it's just too close to home, I gotta tell you, because the description was choice-driven narrative game that brings players into the brooding world of a nation on the verge of collapse. Like, I need an escape, not more of the same. And then finally, this afternoon, breaking news. I see the breaking news right here, Games for Change. And it's this new game called Scaramucci. And it was described like this. It's described as spewing a word salad of bullying obscenities until it sucks its own code and self-destructs. God help us. God help us. So, look, I'm here to take you on a little obsessive journey in a really short period of time, and I hope you will come along and make it fun with me. Now, in order to make it fun, we need a couple of things. We need the audio to work, which would be fantastic. So give it up for the audio guys so they can. And second, I kind of messed up and I didn't bring the sound effects library, so will you guys help me with sound effects? Perfect! I need everybody to help with sound effects. Are you in for that? All right. Then if you're in for that, let's begin where all of this begins.
Well, it's all in your mind. It's all in your mind. Well, it's all in your mind. It's all in your mind.
It's all in your mind. And I'm going to take you through 3 big accidents that have happened over the last 150 years that taught us 3 huge things, really important for all of you. The first one is this: everything we thought we knew about how humans make a decision was totally wrong. That's a big whoops. Second one, everything we thought we knew about changing somebody's mind was totally wrong. And worse, what we do now backfires. Witness the United States of America. And third, a little more hopeful, everything you've ever seen on Star Trek eventually comes true. And you knew that already. And so you'll see these 3 accidents I'm going to take you through. Now, the problem is, in order to propel me back in time, you're going to have to come up with some sound effects. Now, another little challenge here, whenever you hear a Star Trek reference of any kind, and there are a couple that are quite subtle, you should shout out bingo, all right? With just a little practice, this morning I got up, I took my vitamins, I checked to see if I still had dilithium crystals in the cupboard. Thank you. Okay, great. So you're ready for this. So first, we're going to go back 150 years, which is going to be a whopper of sound effects. So your best imagined transporter combined with time machine sound. Ready? Hit it. Nice. Nice. Accident number 1. It's 1848. This handsome young lad named Phineas Gage, for many of you who studied about him in psychology, no doubt, he's working in Cavendish, Vermont, on the most disruptive new technology to hit the Americas ever. What is this disruptive technology in 1848? You got it, baby, the railroad. And so he's working on the railroad, and he's got his tool, which is very sharp at one end and very blunt at the other. He had the blacksmith make it for him, because this is his job on the railroad. Wherever there is rail that's going to be put down, sometimes, oh, there's a boulder in the way. And so in order to blow up the boulder, this is Phineas's job, he would drill sound effects for drilling, please. He's drilling the rock. No. 1848. No electricity, no like Makita power drills. Come on. Yes. Oh, you're on top of this. Great. And then he would put in the hole little bits of black powder, very subtle now. Ooh, nice. Sand, black powder, sand, and he'd put a fuse in, light it, and kaboom. Well, except on September 13th, 1848, there was a mother boulder, and he went and he did his drilling. And he put in black powder, and he put in black powder, and he put in black powder, and he went to tamp it down. Did he forget anything? Yeah. And just like a cigarette lighter, as he took his tool, which he creepily called my constant companion, as he took his constant companion between his hands, and he went to tamp it down in the hole, it came out like a rocket under his left eye, straight out the top of his head, making a kind of Homer Simpson donut hole through his brain. And of course, you would have thought he was dead, but he wasn't dead. He was even speaking. He even joked when the doctor came about a quarter of a mile away from Cavendish with an ox cart to pick him up. He said, "Doctor, we've got some serious business here today." To which the doctor replied, "No shit." So he survived, amazingly, after some pretty bad infections, but he had changed dramatically. And the contemporaneous reporting said he was Phineas who is no longer Gage instead of Phineas Gage, because he had changed in a couple of remarkable ways after the accident. The first was, well, he was kind of a nasty, he went in a well-mannered, professional, responsible kind of person, and he came out a total scaramouche, man. He came out foul-mouthed. He would just, was lewd, and nobody wanted to be around him. And so the crew didn't want him back. But the second big thing that really interested neuroscientists, who were still studying, was that he couldn't seem to make a sound decision after the accident. So this scientist, Antonio Damasio, together with his wife, Hannah, and others, took his brain, his skull, I should say, which is still on display, and they rebuilt the brain in CAD/CAM, and in doing so, they were trying to figure out what part of the brain was obliterated so they might be able to correlate it with decision-making. Now, things in the brain are not that modular, but they looked at it, and they decided actually with living patients, where they did lots and lots of studies, together with the CAD/CAM brain, they isolated it down to 2 parts of the brain that are necessary for every human to make a decision. And they tested this with living patients who had had a disruption between those 2 parts. One who was, pseudonym was Elliot, and Elliot, you could give him very high IQ professional, and you could give him a menu and say, "Elliot, what do you want for dinner?" And you could come back 5 hours later and he could not decide. He couldn't close the deal on the decision, though he could do every pro and con imaginable. Just sort of like modern management. Every pro and con, no decision. And so he looked at this, Antonio Damasio, and he figured out these 2 parts. The amygdala, which were these deep inside the brain, little size of about a walnut on either side, which are said to be the original fight or flight raw emotion processors. And then the ventromedial prefrontal cortex kind of straight back in there. Now here's how they work together. And for those of you, many of you who are neuroscientists, I apologize in advance for the ham-handed metaphor, but please, here you go. A little bit of sound effects for the forest, please. Forest. There's a giggler in the forest. There's a tiger in the forest. Snake! Your amygdala, which is going to try to protect you from dying, is full alert. And your ventromedial prefrontal cortex is going to take a second look and go, not a snake. This time it's a stick that looks like a snake. And so there's this constant balance between the two, and you can see how you'd go wrong if you had only one or the other. In fact, the amygdala matures from quite young in humans, and the ventromedial prefrontal cortex not till you're about 26. Any of you younger than 26? Yeah. Your insurance should be 4x, whatever it is. Because when you're younger than 26 and you can't help it, you are all snake, no stick. It's just nothing you can do about it. You won't get a Top Gun pilot over the age of 26. They get up there and go, Jesus Christ, this is dangerous. What am I doing up here? So this was a huge, huge finding about how humans make decisions. And his takeaway was this, that it's really all about the emotions. That between those two, the governor, the decision maker, is the emotion driver in the brain. He said, we're not thinking machines, we're feeling machines that think. This was a huge finding. And in fact, you've read probably many books since, like Daniel Kahneman's famous Thinking Fast and Slow about the two systems in the brain. Well, between the two, system one, that fast, intuitive blink one, Baba Shiv will tell you what percentage our brain makes in that very fast, intuitive, but often inaccurate side of the brain.
Most of our decisions, whether we like it or not, most of our actions, most of our behavior, most of our experiences are constantly being shaped at the instinctual level. I would argue that about 90 to 95% of our decisions, even important decisions, you might think that you're being rational, but keep in mind that if you pit the rational brain against the emotional brain, in general, it is the emotional brain that is going to win out.
The emotional brain's going to win out. Lesson from accident one. You kind of already knew that, but you have science to prove it. Now, accident two. 1979. Those of you who can remember, who is this band? Thank you. Oh, my God. So I need something to change your mind, thought Charles Lord, a professor who performed this seminal piece of research. Now, the thing I discovered over the last 9 years, I'm a recovering journalist. And I spent more than 20 years in the news business, and then I switched over to Ogilvy, and over the last 9 years, totally obsessed with trying to translate the science back into the communications community. And what I discovered, one of the big problems is in order to be taken seriously as a scientist, you have to speak in the norm of scientific language, which is more like this. Biased assimilation and attitude polarization. The effects of prior theories on subsequently considered evidence. And in fact, if you were in a bar and somebody said, what are you working on? And they were your friend, you'd probably go, oh, it's this really cool piece of research that once somebody believes something, how much can you change their mind with new evidence? That's what this is. And so he took two groups and he did self-selection. One group said by self-selection, they believe in the death penalty, meaning they believe it works, it's effective. And the other group said, no, I don't believe it's effective. It wasn't about morality, does it work, does it not work? And he took these two groups and he gave them summaries of really solid research. And this group looked at the summaries of the research and they said, son of a bitch, I was right. And this group over here looked at their research and said, no, it says it right here, we are right. And he kind of gamed the system by giving them equally robust research with different findings, as happens sometimes. And then he swapped the research and wanted to see how much he might change your mind seeing fresh evidence that maybe you were wrong the first time around. And so let's reenact it in terms of what you think the participants did. This continuum from here to here is my mind. It's sad, I'm sorry. But from here to here is my mind. And here means I don't change my mind seeing the fresh evidence in Charles Lord's experiment. Here, I get kind of mixed up now. I'm thinking about the new evidence. I'm still a little reluctant to give up my point of view. And here, I'm a thinking being. I take on the evidence, and it's possible I change my mind. You got it? Now lock it in, because the moment I start walking, you'll see the hands in front of you, and your hand will fly up with a mind of its own. Have you got it locked in? Ready? Go. Cool, but wrong. Here's what really happened. Count me down, 3, 2, 1. As soon as people saw evidence they were wrong, they went their original direction of belief more fervently than ever before. So he called this confirmation bias, which we all know is the thing more than anything polarizing America right now. The more evidence you get, the more pissed off you get. There's just no way to change somebody's mind with evidence. It sits inside this bigger thing called motivated reasoning, or on Facebook news feeds called filter bubble, and it's profound. In fact, it was done in a brain study looking at people in scanners, and when you showed your candidate talking, you could see that, well, the parts of the brain, including something like oxytocin, a trust hormone, would develop. And when I showed you the opponent, the anterior cingulate cortex, on occasion I think the insula, parts that are said to govern things like attention, but also physical pain and disgust. And when I showed you each candidate flip-flopping, so I show you the enemy candidate flip-flopping, and it's a shitstorm in the brain. And when I show you your candidate flip-flopping, shitstorm is not a scientific term, by the way, just in case anybody's noting, and I show you your candidate flip-flopping, nothing. And when interviewing people, they said, well, in the first instance, he's a liar. You had the evidence he's a liar. Of course I'm going to feel that way. And what about your candidate? Well, he changes his mind with new evidence. That's agility, intellect. This is what we're supposed to do. So it's deeply, deeply rooted in us to not take on fresh evidence. He said that none of the emotion circuits were lighting up in this. Well, this bummed me out when I thought about what happened with the vaccinations in this country a couple of years back. And you might remember in Disneyland, suddenly 40 kids showed up with measles, and we thought measles had been totally eradicated in this country. And I wasn't trying to take sides about frightened parents. I just want to know, where did we go wrong in changing people's minds? Because actually we've known for a very, very long time, very robust science, that the vaccinations work. And so the first part was, well, arguing the facts actually, it makes it worse. I mean, as horrible as that sounds for anybody who studies science, when you argue the facts with somebody who already believes something, it makes it worse. Repeating the myth popularizes it by accident. This is crazy talk, but it's true. It has to do with things called the illusory truth effect, the mere exposure effect, and availability heuristic, meaning this: as smart as we are as a species, if you hear something repeated and repeated and repeated, you begin to think it's more likely to be true. Think Twitter bots. If you want to know about fake news, what's really insidious is not the content, it's the reverberation 10 kajillion times of the same thing. It wears human brains down, and they begin to think the myth might be true. And then the next one, affirmation works, but nobody ever uses this anymore. This is the thing where I say, before I try to change your mind, you're a hell of a lot smarter about this than I am. And I'm new to this, but I got to tell you, this is how I feel about it. You need to bring their shields down, frankly. Thank you. We have a bingo. So the other thing is we consistently underestimate the power of narrative, which is where gaming and immersion comes in. This is amazing power. But along the way, here's something to note and be careful about from an ethics point of view. Charles Seif called this proofiness, kind of like Colbert with truthiness. He said, if you want people to believe something really, really stupid, just stick a number on it. Oh, God, what's this species? Some of you are human, and I apologize. But so,
ooh, she blinded me with science.
She blinded me with science.
Blinded me with science.
no bingos? Who is that singing? No, it's a cover. That's William Shatner. The whole crowd, nobody got a bingo. Fantastic. Oh! So this piece of research was amazing because they found with a single bar graph, I don't mean anything complicated, with a single bar graph, you could raise the believability of a mythical pharmaceutical from 67% to 96%. Just add a bar graph. This is a little bit frightening. So, even easily produced trivial elements associated with science, this thin veneer of science called proofiness, can change minds. But there's got to be a better way, right? There's certainly a better way to change minds. And there really is. And it's like taking somebody to the transporter room. Thank you. It's narrative transportation. And if you look it up, within the behavioral sciences, it is a real thing. And it's studied by really smart people like Raymond Marr and Melanie Green and a host of others. And this is how you can actually change minds through immersion and transport into stories. And this is what you already know. I mean, when you see within gaming the most successful immersion, this is where you can actually develop empathy. So, Raymond
The more
Marr.
that people are transported into the world of the narrative, the more that they feel immersed in the story, the more likely they are to change their beliefs to be more consistent with those that are expressed in the world of the narrative. And what's important to note is that these attitudes and beliefs don't have to be explicitly stated. You know, it works when the attitudes and beliefs are explicitly stated, but even if it's more of an implicit theme in the narrative, will still see attitudes align more in that direction, the more that people are transported or absorbed into these fictional stories. And what's also interesting is that it doesn't seem to matter too much whether you explicitly label this as fiction or nonfiction. So even if you tell people right off the bat, this is just a piece of fiction, the effects appear to be roughly the same. Other people have tried to compare narrative fiction to other forms of persuasive communication, like lectures or nonfiction essays, and what they found is that narrative fiction tends to be more effective. Theoretically, people believe that fiction sort of is a somewhat more subtle way to have people consider a set of ideas because it's not a blatant attempt to change their own opinion.
Now, listen.
What's also interesting is some work by Marcus Appel, who's at the University of Linz in Austria. And what he found is that it doesn't even necessarily have to be an idea that's explicitly stated or an implicit theme in a narrative, but even particular characters in a narrative can affect how people think and feel. So he published a great paper called Reading About Someone Stupid Can Make You Stupid. And what he found is that individuals who are randomly assigned to read about an unintelligent soccer hooligan subsequently performed worse on a test of knowledge compared to individuals who read an unrelated text.
Okay, let's unpack this about the human species. So, first of all, it doesn't matter if I tell you it's fiction or nonfiction. If it's a good narrative, it's equally effective. That's a good thing. Because I can tell you, no, I'm just going to tell you a story now, and as long as it's a really effective story, it's a powerful narrative, I can still probably change your mind, at least far better than any evidentiary or fact-based approach. That's pretty cool. And he found that in other formats, like PowerPoint slides, that doesn't work. It's got to be a story, right? So that's a terrific thing. Next, and here's a little scary. You heard him talk about Marcus Appel from University of Linz in Austria, doing his paper, Reading About Somebody Stupid Can Make You Stupid. Imagine a whole immersive experience in VR with 3 days of stupid. You got to be careful with your characters. The human brain is wired for empathy, and so you might come out of this 40 IQ points lower. Please create brilliant female characters. Here's an example of narrative transportation, as opposed to facts and evidence, a storyline of a father.
We have a very special relationship. Some people don't understand, but we do. Jill was a very good baby, just smiling and bubbling. She was just so cute. Oh, boy. You always have great expectations for your children. My expectations of what Jill's life was going to be included a husband. So when Nikki came to ask permission to marry our little girl, that startled me. I told her, this is not the dream I had for my daughter. I didn't say yes, I didn't say no. Coming out to the wedding from back east, I had some real apprehensions about it. What's this going to look like? Two girls getting married? You have to make a decision. Are you going to have a daughter that you are going to maintain a very wonderful relationship for the rest of your life? Or are you going to lose that child? This was a situation that I had to come to understand. Once we got out to California and we saw how happy they were, all that trepidation just seemed to go away. That was a big turning point. Of course, walking Jill down the aisle, just looking at her, she was breathtakingly beautiful. Judy and I were just swelling with emotion. You come to terms with it and you say, this is the very natural order of things in your life, and it's supposed to be this way.
When Jill was born, there was a certain spark in her eye and a glow in her heart that quickly became very apparent to Judy and I. When she got a little older, and all of a sudden that spark that I looked for in your eyes and your heart, I didn't see. And it pained us greatly. And all of a sudden, bam! There's Nikki, and that spark is back. And we are just so happy that we have our Jill back, and now we have Nikki. We love you both.
I'm thrilled with this, Dad.
So am I.
So am I. I mean it. I love you.
On the trip, I came over all the hurdles in the world to get to where I feel I am today.
That's narrative transportation. Here is a new form of narrative transportation. This is Max Brooks, who has written the new Minecraft novel, and Jack Black.
Build! The zombie was starting down the slope toward me. Something glinted in its grasp. A weapon? I raced to create a hovel around myself.
Boom. Accident number 3, one of my great heroes, Giacomo Rizzolatti. It's 1992, we're in Parma, Italy. And what he was studying was the mapping of the firing of neurons, neuronal clusters. At any given point, you might have as many as 100 billion neurons firing. But like the genome, he wanted to know, can you map neurons in clusters of neurons? And indeed, he did. And he had these rhesus macaque monkeys with little tiny probes in their brain. And he was trying to map one specific motor skill thing. And that was taking a piece of food and the monkey putting it to its mouth. That's it. And he was isolating, and they did it. And they put up the sound of the neurons firing onto audio. It sounds like a little Geiger counter. Give me a little Geiger counter. That, perfect. And it sounded like that, a little less like a fart joke. And except one day, and this was why this is accident 3, one of his crew, in front of one of the monkeys, took one of the monkey's treats himself and heard that. But the human was not wired. And at this moment, Giacomo Rizzolatti and team discovered what are now called mirror neurons, the sort of brain roots of empathy, higher primates and humans. And so this means that we could trigger brain activity by voyeurism. If I watch you do something intently enough, my brain will mirror the actual doing. But it seems to work also with emotions and narrative. We know about this. For those of you who have not had the privilege of the Vulcan mind meld.
Our minds sharing the same thoughts. What is our name? Who are we?
And because it always comes true, this is Yuri Hassan from Princeton University. And he called this originally Vulcan mind meld, speaker-listener neural coupling, et cetera, et cetera. He took a storyteller and scanned their brain as they were telling the story, and separately somebody else listening to the story in a brain scanner to see if they would mirror. And indeed, what he discovered is they did mirror. I know that's a cheesy little graphic, but there were actual brain scans where he found that they would mirror each other as they're listening to the narrative. This is a really powerful thing unless you do shitty narratives. And so it's really important not to say, storytelling, storytelling. Well, there are a million bad stories. The art and science of storytelling is a real thing. And within the world of behavioral science, they'll call this the concreteness effect, or vividness versus abstraction. And some contend, and this is still in debate, and I've looked up a whole body of research related to this in neuroscience, some contend that the brain processes concreteness separately from abstraction. And the ramifications, according to one study, is that concreteness correlates with believability. So when you speak in a way, when I say concrete, I mean vivid, specific imagery that the listener can form pictures in his or her mind as I speak. That's concreteness. Not this. Shame on you if you ever use these words. The grammar Nazis should strike you down if you use these words. And yet every foundation, every corporation, go to their websites, is littered with these words. And the reason they don't work beyond being overused is they don't conjure a picture. Just try this with each other when you're trying to figure out what to say to somebody that's really important. Ask them to draw it. And I give you this challenge. Take out a piece of paper, take out a pencil, and in 5 seconds, draw a paradigm. All right, some smartass once drew a pear and a dime, and I was like, okay, yeah. But these words just don't work. That's not concreteness. I want to end here on a kind of concreteness. How to take something incredibly abstract and through anthropomorphizing it, making it really concrete and emotional. Check this out.
I think I was always misunderstood. People just didn't seem to like me. I think I annoyed them. I got on their nerves. I don't know why. That's just the way it was. Yeah. Maybe I was too intense. Maybe I came on too strong. I don't know. I really can't say. Yeah, it was lonely. Really lonely. But you get used to it after a while. And then, one day, everything changed. Somebody finally accepted me for what I am. Since I've got this job, life is completely different. I finally feel useful, good at something.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your kind attention.